I don't see anything. Remember, like we did last time, just go ahead and open it before you share it. And that way, when you say share screen, you can just click on your presentation that's open. Because right now we just see your document folder. There we go. Okay.
Does that work?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right. Well, thank you again. Again, my name is Rick Roehm, and here in Denver, we're going to talk. Bonnie asked me to talk about some turf issues and growing turf grass and some of the things that we encounter with that. So that's what I'll do my best on. I sell into this market as well. A lot of the lawn care and tree care companies, things like golf courses and parks and rights of ways and things like that. So let's get going on some turf issues of Colorado here. What I'm going to primarily talk about is cool season turf, and that includes Kentucky blue, perennial rye, and some fescues. That is 75% or more of what we see as ornamental turf, and most of the products and compounds that we have are labeled for those types of grasses. On golf courses, particularly on the putting greens and things like that, you'll get some different turf varieties, but mostly it's Kentucky blue, perennial rye, and some fescues. When it comes to weed control, we have quite a few combination products that make up a bunch of different modes of action and different compounds. We have very few single compound products anymore. There's a couple that I'll get to here shortly, but by and large, they tend to come in packages of 2 or 3 or 4. Okay, we have a pre-emergent products. There are only 5 modes of action that are labeled for ornamental turf as pre-emergence. And a couple of them, there's only 1 product in each one. Okay. Gallery is isoxaben. It's a group 21 is its mode of action. It's a cell inhibitor. It's mostly for broadleafs. It's been around an awful long time. You can spray it, you can spread it. It covers a lot of the broadleaf weeds that you'll see in turf, and it even has a label for non-crop. And my previous talk, I talked about it going on to soft bare ground. Barricade is a dinitroaniline along with pendimethalin. It is mostly for crabgrass and some other annual grassy weeds. It does control some annual broadleaf weeds, as does Dimension, but by and large, what you're putting or what you're getting with Dimension or Barricade or pendimethalin is pre-emergent control on crabgrass. The phenoxies, the group 4 herbicides, they're the backbone of lawn care. Okay, they've been around a while. They're mixed and matched, and everybody has them. There's a lot of different formulations. These are the 2,4-Ds, the dicambas, the MCPAs. That's what makes up the phenoxies. Okay, there's a whole lot of ways to buy a whole lot of different phenoxies, and they're in the typical 3- and 4-way products. Some of the newer formulations, the acid chemistries, that's what hardball is. There's an acid dicamba material called Vision, which is out. They're a better mousetrap, if you will, a better way to make an old chemistry, and they're more easily absorbed. They don't volatilize, they don't stink, and you use less of them, and they have both non-crop and turf labels. But by and large, most of the phenoxies are mixed with other things when you put them on the turf grass. The next most popular formulations are the pyridines. Confront is the standard in that. It is chlorpyrrolate and triclopyr. There's a whole lot of ways. Battleship is one of them, to buy fluoxapyr and triclopyr together along with a phenoxy. So what they're doing is mixing and matching, keeping ahead of the weed resistance as best they can, making them economical. The other thing about the phenoxies and the pyridines is their application rates tend to be in increments that are higher. Okay, we're putting a lot more active ingredient out in the environment. Okay, they're older chemistries. That was considered a good thing. More of it controls more weeds. The shift has been to going to less active ingredient and a more prescription approach. We're going to figure out what we're going after, and we're going to find one thing and not very much of it and put it in the tank. But for the time being, the pyridines and the phenoxies do make up the bulk of what goes on turf in controlling weeds. They do come with their label restrictions as well. Okay, 2,4-D can only do 2 broadcast applications a season. Chlorpyrrolid does not go on residential lawns, has to go on commercial turf. And there's some other restrictions about golf courses and sod farms that are unique to that market as well. There are some single compounds that do have their place. Quinclorac is sold as Drive, and then any number of pre-emergents. Carfentrazone and its cousin sulfentrazone are both ALS inhibitors. You can buy them by themselves. Okay, Quicksilver and Antares are 2 of the ways you can do that. But by and large, if you're going across the lawn with one of those compounds, you're going to be tank mixing with something else, either tank side yourself or coming back again with something afterwards. Drive is used primarily in the lawn care game for annual grassy weed post-emergent weed control. It's also very good on field bindweed, but picking up crabgrass after it's gotten away from your pre-emergent application is where most of the quinclorac goes. And then there's 2 fairly new compounds that haven't really hooked up yet, and I'm not aware of any 2 or 3 or 4-way materials with either of these 2 in them. Mesotrione is marketed as Tenacity. Okay, it's a very unique material. It's an HPPD inhibitor. This is the stuff that the HPPD is what makes grass green. It's used in chlorophyll production primarily by the plant. And so when the plant doesn't produce chlorophyll, you get a bleached or a whiting effect. And my friends, it's kind of a goofy look if you've never seen it. Okay, it's looking across an emerald green piece of grass with these white spots in it, depending how many weeds there are. Tenacity is used at very, very low rates. And it's, again, one of the newer compounds that goes on turf. Perfluoroethyl is primarily used as a heat-up material. Okay, you would mix this with something else usually, and it makes whatever you're using work a little faster and show a more visual effect, and that can be very important in the lawn care game. And I guess every turf herbicide talk should include something about Defender. And Defender is kind of a one-of-a-kind product. Okay, it's an ALS inhibitor is its mode of action. It's a post-emergent and a pre-emergent material. Okay, this product was built primarily to control one weed and one weed alone, and that is dandelions. In the lawn care game, your weed control is judged by that weed and sometimes nothing else. And so Dow, and now they call themselves Corteva, but when they were Dow, they came out with this material, and it's very good at controlling dandelions, both as a post-emergent and a pre-emergent. Okay, if there's other weeds on the site, you probably going to want to mix it with something else, but you can indeed get season-long pre-emergent activity with an application of Defender on the lawn, and that's important. The one thing you need to know about weed control in turf is the weeds are opportunistic. They will seize any opportunity they are given, and those opportunities present themselves as bare spots, places where the turf grass is thinnest, okay, places where you've had some irrigation issues perhaps, or some insect pressure. That is where most of your weeds are going to come in, okay? As with a lot of other things in life, timing is everything, okay? Younger is better, okay? Trying to control weeds in when they're younger stage of their growth is far easier than going after them later in the season after they've established themselves. You can see on this chart that certain weeds appear just about in any scenario. Shady lawns, sunny lawns, low height, high height, poorly drained soil. Weeds will seize any opportunity. And so if you're having a whole lot of weed pressure on a lawn over the course of the entire season, perhaps establishing a better stand of turf grass might be in your best interest before dumping more herbicide on it is. All right, the basics for what is needed in a healthy turf. We're recommending aeration still, okay? Pulling plugs out of a lawn. Deeper is better, spring and fall. At a time when the soil temperatures aren't so high that you're going to dry out the root zone of that turf grass. Consistent irrigation. Here in the Denver area, the last month or so has been just nothing but a baking oven. We've had no rain till earlier in the week, and so consequently, nearly every problem that we've encountered with a lawn in August and the first part of September has been irrigation related. Okay. A lot of these products only work as well as the irrigation that they're provided with. In addition to that, 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, and we want at least half of that being in some sort of slow release form. Okay, that's going to provide lower salts, less burn potential. It's going to extend the utilization of that nitrogen, no matter what form it's in. You're not going to get thatch buildup. At least half of it being in a slow release form is what we're recommending. And then also we're coming to find out that humic acid is almost a magic elixir to some of these lawns. It's going to make the turf hold water better, utilize the nutrients better. It's organic. It's going to allow for organic material to hold herbicides into the soil profile if that's where you want to put them, and it's also going to help keep the insect pressure down. Humic acid is something that the turf industry probably wasn't really aware of as recently as 10 years ago, but now it's a very common part of most lawn care applications. All right, talk about some specific weeds, if we could. If it is a legume, a clover, any form of oxalis, any type of black medic, there is a high degree of probability that a pyridine herbicide will control it. I think the best one for controlling that family is triclopyr. Certainly chlorpyrrolid and fluoxapyr are very good as well. And then the sulfentrazone or carfentrazone, one of those two mixed in, seems to do very, very well with controlling that type of weed, the clovers and the oxalises. Dandelions, mallow, plantain. I like a phenoxy and a pyridine as well. Of course, the dandelions, we just talked about Defender and what it was made for. And frankly, in my mind, there's nothing better defender on dandelions, but there might be some other weeds in the turf, other weeds that are named plantain or mallow, and I think a phenoxy and or a pyridine is going to do very well on those. Annual grasses and field bindweed. That's in quinclorax wheelhouse all day long. Okay. Field bindweed, when the runners are extended as far as they will go, you want a whole lot more leaf surface to absorb as much quinclorac as you possibly can. And then crabgrass is certainly one that one of the weights that you're measured against when you're in the lawn care game. And any form of quinclorac is going to do very well on crabgrass post-emergent. For the thistles and things like wood sorrel, any of these deeper rooted perennial weeds, the pyridines again, chlorpyrrolid and triclopyr, if they're mixed with one of the ALS inhibitors such as carfentrazone and sulfentrazone, I think you're going to be very successful. Sulfentrazone seems to be more active in the warmer temperatures, so you would run it in the summertime and early fall. Carfentrazone is a springtime player as well as later in the season in the fall. Some of the summer annuals that you see, we see spotted spurge a lot and purslane. Besides being opportunistic, a combination of a phenoxy and a good surfactant is going to get through those. And the annuals, the summer annuals, in my experience, are control them in May and June. If you're trying to chase purslane and some of the rest of those around in August or September, I'm afraid it's probably gotten away from you, and you might want to think about Plan B for next year. Many times, a turf weed control program calls for a bed and border program, and this can have some different labeling nuances. Now, a bed and border, the two pictures on the left are very nice ornamental, certainly something you would see in a residential application. The one in the middle is somewhat borderline, and I'm on the fence. You could make an argument that it's industrial, and you could certainly make an argument that it's an ornamental application. Okay, there's not any turf around there, but there are certainly some trees that the guy who owns that warehouse is not going to want you to kill or affect. So there's some labeling nuances that frankly I don't feel are very, very clear, and it brings up an interesting conversation, certainly. The pre-emergent options for those sites, there's a couple of different compounds. The old school way of doing it was with the DNAs, the orange stuff. That's what surflan is. Oryzolin is one of those. You could certainly put barricade. You could put trifluoril in there. You could put pendimethalin in those bare ground sites, and those are all DNAs. Spectacle is one of the newer ones. It's basically esplanade with an ornamental label. Okay, and it goes into bed and borders very, very nicely and gives season-long weed control. Flumioxazin is what's in SureGuard. There's also some generics that are out there. It goes in bed and borders as well, and it also has an aquatic allowance. Snapshot is a combination product, does not go into turf. Okay, it's a granular product that you would spread on the rock or mulch areas, season-long control. It is gallery plus trifluoride. So it's a couple of modes of action, and it's a very good way to go. And then barrier is fairly unique. Okay, it's diclobanyl, the only chemistry that is in its class. It's an over the top, it's a season long, but it's a pre-emergent that does not go into turf. In my last talk, visited a little bit about the post-emergent non-selective options. The main player is still glyphosate, sold as Roundup in its many forms. But the next men up are named Scythe, which is the fatty acids material. Okay, Fireworks is also a similar type of fatty acid post-emergent bird down. Axe is ammonium nanoate, and Cheetah Pro is glufosinate. And the Cheetah Pro is kind of a one-off from glyphosate, but it's usually off enough to satisfy the person who doesn't want you to use glyphosate on their landscape. But these are the ornamental labeled post-emergent non-selective options that are available at the moment. All right, funguses. There's two types of funguses in Colorado that go on turf grass. The very few that go into home lawns and residential lawns, and then golf courses have their own set of fungal problems. I'm not going to cover golf courses today. If there's a whole plethora of products that are labeled for that and only labeled for that, and that involves some different fertilization methodologies, some different grasses, and the wrong fungus can get you fired if you're a golf course superintendent. There's a saying among sales reps who sell into the golf market that you're always supposed to get to know the assistant superintendent pretty well whenever you go in to call on a golf course, because there's a high degree of probability you'll be dealing with him in a short amount of time. But there's a lot of different ways to buy fungicides. Okay, is it a strobe, a DMI, a carbamate, a phenylamide, or a carboxamide? These are all different modes of action. Okay, they're very important, but more importantly is their site of action. Okay, whether they're working in the crown and the soil of the turf grass, or whether they're working on the blade, and they can be very timing specific. When is that fungal pathogen actually going to be exposed to the fungicide you are spraying or spreading on that piece of grass? Funguses like turf are also an imbalance, more so in terms of irrigation and fertility than anything else. But the fungicides can be divided into a lot of different ways, and this is what I mean when I talk about their site of action. Are they locally systemic? Do they move a little bit in the leaf blade? Do they move from the crown up to the top, or from the top up to down to the bottom? The DMIs can have a growth regulating effect. If you're on a golf course, that's a good thing. But it's basically, where is that fungus active and when, as to what you're going to reach for to spray or spread on that turf grass. In the Denver area and the entire Front Range of Colorado, in fact, the biggest fungal pathogen issue that we have is necrotic ring spot. Okay, that's what it looks like in the picture there. It's a result of compaction. Too much nitrogen can cause it to flare up. Kentucky bluegrass is the only host, okay, and it's only active in the spring and the fall. Now you can sure see the results of it in the middle of the season if the fungus is active in the spring and kills those ring spots. You will see the results of it in July and August, but the fungal pathogen is actually active in cooler soil temperatures, which is October and April and maybe even early May. Okay, so that's when you're going to want to be treating it with one of the fungicides that's labeled for it. I've found that Headway is probably the best, but these are also products that you would want to spread rather than spray. And this goes back to that slide or two earlier about the site of action. Necrotic ring spot is active in the soil and at the crown of the plant, not on the leaf blades. So if you're spraying something and the leaf is already dead, you're not going to get the translocation down to the crown of the plant. Now, you will get some activity because of the spray is applied directly to the crown, but more often than not, the success seems to come from the granular products of the same formulations. Ascochyta and dollar spot look very, very similar, and this is what they look like. It looks as if you just went to the top of the leaf blade and pinched it off. And Ascochyta is what gives a turf that dirty, dusty, brownish look across it in the spring as it's become summer, and then sometimes later in the season as well. It can be the result of, more than anything, just a large temperature swing that the irrigation could not keep up with. Okay, when it's a leaf spot, we can deal with it. We can spray it out, or we can let it grow out. When it gets to the crown of the plant, when it gets to the point where it's dreschelaria and causes melting out, that is a dead spot, and dead does not come back. Okay, sometimes the bluegrass or the perennial rye, and both are susceptible to it, will fill back in by itself, but sometimes it won't, and you'll have to live with that dead spot. You want to control it when it's on the leaf blade, and we can spray it out. Okay, by the time it gets down to the crown of the plant, we have to go to some different options to make the turf grass look better. Some of the things that exacerbate these leaf spot diseases are excessive quick release nitrogen, okay, more than anything else, as well as moisture that's left on the leaf blade for too long. In Colorado, where it's relatively dry and not very humid, excessive moisture on the leaf blade isn't really that big of an issue, but certainly quick release nitrogen is. And this goes back to my earlier slide that recommends that a lot of the nitrogen be applied as in the slow release form, whether it's a polycoat, a sulfur coat, or some other type of coating or U-flex material that is going to delay that nitrogen, keep it from volatilizing, and keep the disease pressure down. Mowing high is also gonna help. That means cutting the blade off, not your state of mind when you go out to do the mowing, friends. So, but a number of the fungicides that we have will control any of the leaf blades. Those are a couple of the more common materials that we have up there. Eagle is probably the best one. These are all appropriately labeled, and you can spray them for any of the leaf disease controls that you want to have on your turf grass. There is some wisdom to rotating these things. Okay, like weeds and insects, funguses can build up resistances to different modes of action. All right, let's talk about some insects. One of the biggest problems in the fall and in the spring are turf mites. Banks grass mite and clover mites. These are the little small turf mites that come out in the cooler temperatures and the dry exposed turf areas. They get established on the turf and then just suck the juices out of it. And when April turns into May, you then find out that you had mites all winter, and this part of the lawn isn't greening up. It's usually on a south or western slope, and again, it's a problem in drier, more exposed, less snowy wintertime. We do have some answers for turf mites. Hexagon is the only ovicide that is labeled for mite control on turf. Okay, it's an ovicide, it kills the eggs. Okay, it has a little effect on the adults that are actually there that day. Because it's an ovicide, it takes a long time to work. Hexagon is not a material that you would want to spray on a lawn at a time of the year when you're likely to come by and mow it off next week. It needs to be sitting on the lawn in order to kill the eggs for as long as possible. But it's a very good one, and it's the only one that's labeled for, again, turf mites in this region. Bifenthrin is sold as Tall Star. It's one of the ways that bifenthrin is sold, and it's an adult miticide, and a pretty good one when it comes to turf mites. Not so good when it comes to some of the other warm season mites that you see in things like honey locust and plants like that. But it's very good on Banks grass mite and on clover mite. A good combination would be to mix them together and apply them at a time of the year so you could get today's mites as well as next week's mites with the Hexagon. If it's not a mite and it's a bug in the lawn, it is probably either a bill bug or a weevil. Okay, that's what happens to grubs when they grow up. They become either a beetle, a chafer, a weevil, or a bill bug, depending what type they are. Grubs are little small grains of rice that are usually underneath the turf at that point in their life. And then when they grow up, they become a beetle, such as a Japanese beetle, which we have a lot of here in Denver. Yeah, we have bill bugs out here. They would crawl on the sidewalks, not so much in the ornamental plants, but they will certainly nibble on turf. If it is a caterpillar, it's going to turn into a moth at some point of its life. So again, grubs become beetles, bill bugs or weevils, caterpillars become moths. If you were wondering what kind of grub you're trying to find, you can turn him over, peel him apart, and what is called the roster pattern, which is the hairs that are on his backside, will tell us who he is. Now there's a chart right up there, and if you want to memorize that and start picking up bugs and unfolding them, that's your prerogative. But by and large, if you have a grub down there, we have some materials that are going to keep him from eating the roots. The key to it is spraying or spreading those materials at the time of the year when he's active down there. When he's by the time he's already a beetle or a chafer or a weevil, we have to use different things, and it becomes a little more problematic with chasing them around. So certainly the grub stage, when he's in the subsurface of your turf grass, is the better time to control it. What we're using to control them is usually some spreadable materials. Arena, imidacloprid, or Dilox are all very good grub control materials. Okay, spread them out there, water them in, and you're likely to get a very high level of control if you're doing that in April or May, or again now in August and September. Now's a good time to go out and spread things to control grubs. In between there, in the middle of the season, if he was a beetle, a Japanese beetle or a weevil or something like that, we would have had more trouble controlling him. Acelepryn is one of the cleanest, safest materials that you will ever spray on an insect. Okay, it's designed for one pest only, and that pest is Japanese beetles when they're in the adult stage. Okay, you can spray it on the rose, you can spray it on the linden tree, and the big point about acelepryn is it's not going to kill the bee that is going to come visit. Okay, it's very safe on pollinators, and that's a good thing because Japanese beetles oftentimes visit the same types of plants that pollinators do at the same time of the year. So again, acelepryn is the only material that has such a propensity for that. Cutworms Armyworms, webworms, they are likely to have multiple generations, okay? You could be spraying the grass for webworms as well as miller moths at the same time. Now, miller moths don't really cause the kind of damage that cutworms and armyworms and webworms do. They're going to chew off the leaf blade and chew it right down to the crown of the plant, although they really don't usually kill the crown of the plant completely. They like to go more towards the next grass blade over, which is softer at the top. So, but they will, again, chew them around. They're very good bird food. Okay, if you have a lot of birds in your yard in the morning, they could be certainly going after those guys. But they turn into miller moths at some other point of their existence, and then they're flying around. They do less damage to their lawn and more of an annoyance to you when they're in the flying around stage. Control of these guys, we're going to want to use any lepidopteran control material. Okay, Astro and Baseline are permethrin and bifenthrin. They're both pyrethroid chemistries. They're very good. They're very broad spectrum. They will kill bees, but you can sure spray them on a place where a bee is not going to visit. The spraying might be compromised if you're going to come in and mow the grass the next day, and that's always the hardest thing. Orthene is an old carbamate chemistry. Okay, it's acephate is its active ingredient, and it's a different, unique mode of action than any of the other two, but it's also going to give a pretty good knockdown. Okay, Orthene is also one of the other ones that you could use as a plan B for turf mites. You could spray it on turf as well. I don't think it's as good as bifenthrin, but it's going to clean up some mites as well. Safari is dinotephuron. It's probably the broadest spectrum of any of those compounds listed up there. It's the most soluble. Okay, it's going to last the longest, and it's probably the one that would translocate down to the root zones as well. Okay, so if you did want to somehow try and kill the grubs that were below the soil surface and anything that was flying around and nibbling on the leaf blade, Safari would probably be the choice that you reached for in there. But cutworms, armyworms, webworms, they're all susceptible to any of these different chemistries. There's nothing unique about any of these. They're very broad spectrum, they're very safe, and they're fairly inexpensive to use. For the grubs, again, May and June, that's your Dilox, that's your Arena, that's your imidacloprid. Spray the beetles in between. The caterpillars and moths, they can be sprayed at any time they're active. And again, that just may conflict with your management activities of when you're going to mow next and so on and so forth like that. So that's probably enough about turf. Does anybody have any questions on turf grass management, pesticide?
Questions? Any questions? I guess we have no questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nina, are you?